Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by the movie Hangout. So I gotta talk about it. I think it's in a lot of people's minds right now. Two iconic male characters that happen to have beards, by the way. So if you're an actor and your character is iconic, refuse at all cost. Just don't do it. You know what? If you have to promise the producers or the executives of the studio that you're gonna grow a beard, tell them whatever they want to hear and then just shave it because it looks like an iconic character with a beard for whatever reason gets screwed majorly. So right now I'm going to be talking about who got screwed over worse, Luke Skywalker or Jon Snow. As soon as the end of Game of Thrones happened Sunday night, this immediately popped in my mind because I felt like the season or the series finale of Game of Thrones was literally the last Jedi of the entire Game of Thrones series. In the Last Jedi, you had an amazing build up over the original trilogy of Luke Skywalker, and then you had the Force Awakens, and they introduce him back again, and you're like, oh man, like everybody's talking about Luke Skywalker, everybody's talking about Luke. We're gonna see something amazing from Luke, and then he gets on screen and he looks like the Unabomber. Literally, looks like Ted Kaczynski. He's got the scraggly homeless man beard. He's got the unwashed, unkempt hair. He's wearing like a burlap onesie type of thing. He's around all these fish nuns, fish reptile nun things alone on an island. I mean, it's really sad and pathetic. And rather than kind of reclaiming the throne, reclaiming the mantle of being the last great Jedi in the entire galaxy and universe. He's basically just cucked to a point where he ends up fading away at the very end and dying. And everybody's just kind of like, okay. And it was just really sad because his character, Anakin Skywalker, who was Darth Vader, had a much more epic death. Much more epic death. He didn't just, fade away. He actually fought with a lightsaber in person. There was no hologram. It was a good death. So we all were like, I just think from a storyteller standpoint, from a fan standpoint, the Luke Skywalker character he's given enough in his life. He's lived a life of discipline, a life of self-sacrifice, a life that deserves an amazing final chapter. And then nothing happens. Then rather than there not even being a final chapter, they literally just take a huge dump on the final chapter, and it was awful. Honestly, Disney would have done a better job if they would have just put out a graphic novel or something, giving him a good death rather than what they did. If they would have made it like a CGI Toy Story animated film, it would have been better than The Last Jedi. So that immediately got me thinking about Game of Thrones as well. So Game of Thrones, you have Jon Snow. This man has been through hell and back again. Literally, he dies, he comes back to life. He survives the climb on the ice wall. He brings one of the members of the dead army to Cersei to show that, hey, these things actually exist, which was an amazing feat in itself. He ends up defeating the dead army, going head to head, with the king of the dead, the Ice King, the Ice Walker guy. And then at the very end, he kills Daenerys, and then they banish him like the Unabomber. I mean, it's just amazing. He out of all the characters, a lot like Luke Skywalker, he's treated the worst. And it's like, what are we teaching kids? If you give the most, if you sacrifice the most, then you're going to get the least. I mean, honestly, like, it's ridiculous. I mean, it almost this show, Game of Thrones and The Last Jedi, almost advocate for a life of complete debauchery, because it's like, well, heck, I might as well just take everything I can get, give nothing, be a douche, sleep with as many chicks as possible, get as much gold as possible, and then die, because heck, if I live a life of celibacy, a life of monogamy, if I live a life of without material possessions, with putting other people first. That I'm just going to kind of get thrown to the side at the very end when it's most convenient for everyone else. I mean, it's just ridiculous, so counterintuitive. And honestly, I don't think that these two stories would have happened 10 years ago. I really don't. I think that there's a weird evolution to storytelling right now. And it's kind of like how it was in the early 80s. In the early 80s, you had Blade Runner, you had a lot of anti-hero movies that never happened before. So you had people you were cheering for in movies that were actually doing bad things, but they had, a good side to them. And before then, you really didn't see that in movies. You just saw the good guy is all good and the bad guy is all bad, and there's nothing really to think about with that. This this phase where you're in movies and in television and the storytelling, I think is it's similar, but it's in some ways different than the early 80s with like the Decker character in Blade Runner. It's different because it's stupid, it's idiotic, it's moronic, and above all, it doesn't make any sense. Because with an anti-hero character, we see anti-heroes all the time. We see a police officer maybe that, you know, means well, but he ends up going beyond the law and he beats up a guy who hit his kid, or he beats up a guy who hit his girlfriend. He throws somebody down a flight of stairs and that's illegal, but he did it because he knows it's the only thing that's going to stop this evil person from continuing to do, their abusive behavior. So it's like you can see that and you can kind of justify it and you go, you know what, if I was in that person's shoes, I might do the same thing. Even a character like Deadpool, the guy curses, the guy's vulgar, he does a lot of things he should not be doing, but he's doing it for good. So you're like, you know what, I think I can jump on board with that. I see redeeming qualities. And with this, it's just like, you don't I don't personally feel Luke Skywalker or Jon Snow that connection. Now that this is how the characters ended, I don't feel the connection I do with those anti-heroes, because rather than me jumping on board and being like, yeah, man, I want to be you, I identify with you, the whole time I'm just looking at them and going, dude, get out of here, get away from these people. It's almost like they are, rather than them abusing bad people, they are being abused by bad people. And but they just keep giving and giving and giving because there's this unwritten rule and this stupid phase of storytelling that if you get crap from people, you just have to take it and keep giving your best no matter what. And that's just not reality. None of us would do that. If we were mistreated or crapped on and you really don't have to take it, then you just would walk away and be like, you know what, screw you. Jon Snow, at the very end of the whole series, he's the one that gets banished back to the wall. So he ends up exactly where he started. So his character doesn't fulfill his prophecy. His character doesn't end on a high note like the end of the movie Rocky, when Rocky beats Apollo Creed, and the last frame of the movie is him at the very pinnacle of his glory. They don't show him going home and, there's like empty packages of popcorn and soda all over the floor and he goes back to his rundown apartment. They don't do that. They show the very pinnacle of his life. This is the highest point he's ever going to get for that character. And they end on it. With Jon Snow, they end on the lowest note. The lowest note. Because it's even lower than the beginning of the whole series, because in the beginning of the series, you're like, you know what, there's a good chance this guy is going to end on a high note. With the very end of the season, with the series finale, that's it. There's no other quest. They're not going to be doing, another season of this. So it's just really sad. It just makes you frustrated. And you're like, dang, like I just feel so sorry for this guy. And I'm so frustrated and I hate all those other people that ruined it for him. You know? I mean, it almost is like maybe you should have just let Daenerys live. I mean, seriously, he would have been treated better. And then with Luke Skywalker defeats Darth Vader. Nobody else could have defeated Darth Vader. Darth Vader is literally the equivalent to the King of the Dead. The White Walker King. He's literally that equivalent. Nobody could defeat him. He had superhuman, supernatural powers. And Luke Skywalker, lived like a monk his entire life, had no romantic relationships with anyone, and just, buckled down and studied and practiced and did everything he possibly could. He kind of lived like a life of solitude to sacrifice his life, all of those years of his life, to defeat his father. And he killed his own father, which, if you really think about it, that's pretty remarkable. The guy sacrificed his own family member so other people would live. He could have chosen to join Darth Vader, overthrown the Emperor, and then ruled with his father, and maybe talk to Darth Vader and kind of soften him a little bit so he wouldn't just slaughter people. But instead, he kills his own father, and then he ends up having to live like a complete hermit because he feels like a failure. And then at the very end, he sacrifices himself again, and then that's the end of the whole deal. It's just sad. It makes you think back to Luke Skywalker from A New Hope, and it ends with him looking out, into the sunset, and just being like, I'm gonna, I have a destiny I need to fulfill. It just makes you feel bad for him because it's like that's the destiny, that's the ending to this amazing tale, almost a biblical tale. That's it. That's the end of it. And I mean, I guess in some ways, both of these characters are kind of like Moses in many ways. They take a group of people, out of bondage, out of slavery, out of misery, and then they go through hell, and then right before they themselves get to go to paradise, to the promised land, they die. And everybody that whined and complained and doubted them, they get to go. So I guess in some ways they're more like Moses, but still I feel like Moses got treated a little bit a little bit better than these two. I mean, holy crap. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, I just had to rant about this because, oh, I'm so freaking frustrated. You've no idea. I mean, one thing I love is good storytelling. And when the storytelling is great until the final chapter, and then it's just like undoes everything they work so hard to do, it's just so freaking frustrating. But anyway, let me know what you think. Who do you think got the worst deal out of the two? It's definitely worth a thought because I mean, jeez, oh man, they both got a pretty raw deal. So comment below, let me know. And as always, if you want to get future rants, reviews, or original content, click subscribe. Later.